Hello, my name is Andrew Keane. Welcome to Keane on America, the daily interview show about the United States. Hello, everybody. My guest today is an expert on perhaps the trickiest of all things, the idea or the reality of truth itself. He doesn't have a PhD, and as he jokes, if he did, he would be called Dr. Truth, but he's just a Mr. Truth to you and I. Steve Rosenbaum, I've known him for many years, is the author of an intriguing new book, The Future of Truth, How AI Reshapes Reality. And he is joining us from the Upper West Side of New York City, the City of Truth. Steve, congratulations on the upcoming book. Be out in a few weeks. Before we get to the future of truth, what's the history of truth? Is it just really the history of philosophy, the history of thought?
So first of all, I should caution you, I don't claim to be an expert. I think of myself as a journeyman. And maybe I should just start by telling you how the book kind of like was born.
Are you wriggling out of this one, Steve? If you're not
no,
why are you writing a book on truth?
Well, the book itself is weighty and the topic is weighty, but you have to be careful. I'm not a PhD. It's not that I'm not a PhD because I don't have the time to go to school for it. It's because I'm not wired that way. I mean, I am in my DNA, a storyteller and a journalist. And the fun of writing the book was asking a hard question, thinking it was important. And then as I got deeper into it, realizing not only is it important, but it may be urgent and desperate. And, you know, truth has been a puzzle for a long time. And I'll tell you about some of the people in the book. You know, a bunch
hold on. I think you're wriggling out of this one. I mean, if you're going to come up, whether or not you're an expert, whether you have a PhD or not, if you're going to write a book called The Future of Truth, you've got to be able to define what the word means.
All right. I think that I think I can do. And I'll start with the biggest problem with the word. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on your show or not. But
anything you want.
All right. It in some ways it's kind of a shitty word because it means two totally different things. Objective truth and subjective truth couldn't be more different. And so when you're in a barroom conversation about, you know, blah, 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 the election in 2000 was stolen, like people have opinions about things. And then there are facts, like the sky is blue or gravity keeps us kind of connected to the earth. We've allowed ourselves to use that word casually, and I think that's dangerous. And AI comes along.
Hold on. Let's leave AI for a moment.
All right.
You made a distinction between what objective and subjective truth. What does that mean?
Yes, I did.
So what is an objective truth and what is a subjective truth?
1 + 1 = 2.
Or as Orwell so famously said, 2 + 2 = 5, although he was arguing in a different context. Okay, yes. So that's mathematical truth, although there are philosophers of mathematics who might argue that isn't always the case. But anyway, so...
And by the way, my memory of the last time we were together is you argue that isn't always the case.
What, that 2 + 2 = 5 or 4?
No, you pushed back on, we were in an auditorium in New York and you pushed back on gravity, which I enjoyed, by the way, very much.
Yeah, I don't remember. I have to admit, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on either gravity or math, but this is your show.
All right, fair enough.
Today, so let's focus on what you're saying. So on the one hand, you have the objective truth of science, of mathematical science, 1 + 1 or 2 + 2 = 2 or 4, and then what's the other truth you said?
What? Subjective truth, which is you and I discussing something you believe and something I believe, which might be totally different. And we could, you know, and so people now increasingly talk about, well, I have my truths and you have yours. And,
well, there's another word. I don't know if you write about it in the book. I'm sure you cover it. The O word, opinion. Isn't that what opinion is? So there's truth and opinion. We all have beliefs or opinions about the world itself, but they're not necessarily true.
Well, if we were labeling things that clearly, the world would be a simpler place. But there's a famous moment on the White House lawn where a then Trump acolyte and employee talked about, we have our truths and they have their truths. And you could argue that was almost the moment that came out from hiding. And all of a sudden, we were in a world in which there were multiple versions of truth that were fact-based. And that had to do with, I think, the number of attendees, at his inauguration, whether it was the most crowded lawn or not. And what makes this a moment in time for this conversation to take place, and why, frankly, I wanted to have it with you, is because it's not something we can shrug our shoulders at. It's not something we can say, well, and if you spend time with young people, as I do, their view of truth and news is very different than ours.
And of course, you spend a lot of time with young people. You're the co-founder. I think you co-founded it in 2022 of the Sustainable Media Center, focusing on technology, social media, AI, truth, all those big issues. But Steve, these issues are perennial. I mean, I don't want to sound too boring, but Socrates, or Plato at least, according to Plato, Socrates addressed this distinction between truth and opinion in the Republic. It's been a perpetual theme throughout the history of Western thought. What are you saying that isn't in any way original or interesting about it?
What I'm saying, so the book is not an academic book. It's not meant to be.
Still say something interesting, even if it isn't academic.
When you look at the people who are in it, and many of them, they're all interesting thinkers, and they all have points of view on this subject, but they haven't been brought together. And part of what I tried to do was take readers on a fun, curious, puzzling journey, and then say gently, because I'm not one of these apocalypse, the world is ending, AI is going to eat the planet people. If we don't care about truth at this moment, we might very well be heading into a world in which we allow it to vanish. And that, I think, is a terrible outcome. We can talk a little bit about
what if you say then, okay, so I take your point. So you're not claiming to be Socrates or even Plato here. You're suggesting in this book, The Future of Truth, that you talk to a number of influential thinkers, and they're friends of both of ours, people who've been on the show many times: Douglas Rushkoff, Larry Lessig, Gary Marcus, Esther Dyson, and many others. Is it a kind of anthology then, a series of stories about truth in which you go around looking for truth and you talk to people who spend their time thinking about these issues?
The first half of the book, yes. And one of the things I realized as I was doing the reporting is, I had relationships with these people that go back to early Web 1.0 days. And so the conversations I was able to have with them were both intellectually fascinating, but also casual and lighthearted. And so like Doug Rushkoff tells a story about being 5 years old and going to see Fiddler on the Roof. And he remembers distinctly Zero Mostel from the stage breaking the fourth wall and looking at him and making a statement and having this very youthful kind of aha moment about truth, and whether or not the people on the stage were characters or whether or not they were human beings talking to him. And I love that story for two reasons. One, because that's kind of where we are right now. When AI starts saying, hey, Andrew, well, have you thought about looking at it this way? You're like, wait, it sounds like a person and it's speaking to me in human tones. My human nature is to accept that interaction as a human interaction, when in fact we know that it's a box of wires and chips saying those words. But Doug is also, as I've known him for many years, and you have as well, increasingly terrified of where we're ending up, and really thinks that we're on our way into a very dangerous place, and says so with great passion and conviction.
So yeah, and we, as you know, Steve, we do many shows on this, many shows with Rushkoff. So what's the connection though between your narrative in the future of truth, this search for truth, or this series of conversations on truth, and the future? I mean, why is the world poorer without truth in the future? Why is that a bad thing?
Well, it's a 300-page book, and we're getting to page 299, but I'm happy to go there if that's where you want to go.
Well, that's exactly, yeah, and then we can go back to the details. But so what's the big deal about losing truth if we don't have it in the future?
I think there are things that exist in our life for which truth is a fundamental requirement. And part of what I tried to do in the book is take people through a journey through health, work, love, family, and realize that when you get into the guts of AI, we use all these fuzzy words like, what we don't say out loud is that AI is at its core a spectacularly good liar. It tells you exactly what you want to hear. And even when it knows it's wrong, it lies. And it lies, and that's not a code problem. That's not a tweak. That's in its core DNA, at least in the LLM version. And this is where Gary Marcus, I think, makes a passionate argument that the problem is not with AI, but that with the current structure of AI, which basically is, a parrot. And so it goes and reads all the words that Andrew Keen has ever said, and then it kind of manufactures a version of Andrew Keen when Steve Rosenbaum is asking ChatGPT what Andrew Keen thinks about truth. I mean, if we put up on the screen what it delivered back to me, it would be pretty good. You wouldn't deeply disagree with it, except in one or two places where you'd be like, wait, that's just fucking wrong. And so as this technology gets baked into society and government and politics and civics, all of a sudden we have a society in which lying well is really the tool you need to succeed. And
but again, I take your point, Steve, but why is this in any way any different from anything in the past, from books or from speech? You say that AI is a spectacularly good liar, but so are we humans. I mean, we've done many shows, in fact, a couple recently, on the real truth of the human condition is that of our need to tell stories. Aren't stories a kind of lying, a kind of untruth?
If you want to unpack the danger, so let's look at the moment we are in politics. So, Donald Trump built a social network. He called it Truth Social. That wasn't an accident. I mean, he'd never used the word in any branding of any Trump anything before that moment. But either through wise consultants or his intuitive sense of what could make the market work, and every post that he puts on Truth Social, he calls a truth. So if you're on Twitter, the site formerly known as Twitter, you called them tweets. Now he calls them truths. So every single thing.
No one takes seriously what Trump says. I mean, nobody, I don't think, certainly no one treats him as a particularly credible figure. Coming to your idea of...
Hold on, stop. I can't let that just stand there. 51% of the country believes he's a credible figure. He got elected twice.
I'm not sure that was 51%, but anyway, coming back to this idea of AI being a spectacularly good liar. I mean, I looked up truth using Google's Gemini, and it seemed to me it wasn't really lying. Talks about pragmatic theory, objective truth, subjective truth, relative truth, all the stuff that we've been talking about today. Well, why is AI any more or less a liar than any other media we've had in the past?
So, you know, the social media phrase from, you know, a bunch of people is that if you're not the customer, you're the product. So let's talk about that in terms of AI.
Well, let's talk about it in terms of Google Gemini. I'm not sure I'm entirely the product. I'm not paying for Google. I just looked it up on the internet.
Right. And there's no ad next to that answer.
Doesn't seem to be. I mean, if we look at the screen,
no, actually,
there's I don't see any.
Right. So what we know about all of these platforms is they start out free, and then at some point they become less free, and then at some point they become advertising. So when you go to Gemini or in a year and you say, I have a headache, Gemini, what should I do? And Gemini responds, CVS has a very well-priced headache remedy, and you're, based on Google Maps, you're a block away from a CVS, and we have a relationship with Instacart. Would you like us to deliver to you that aspirin? We can have it to you in 15 minutes.
Or it might say, if you've got a headache, read your book, Steve Rosenbaum's The Future.
Yeah, no, it'll make your headache worse. But my point is, these are businesses, right? And they've raised, as you know, billions of dollars, and the people that have given them billions of dollars are going to want their money back, and they're going to want their money back.
I mean, I'm not sure whether that's true with Google, but Anthropic, for example, has come out very clearly. Dario Amodei has made it very, very clear, in contrast to Sam Altman at OpenAI, that he's not going to have ads. And in fact, they even had ironically enough, I guess, an ad at the Super Bowl this year suggesting that Anthropic would never sell ads alongside its AI. So that's not true either.
So now you're disappointing me intellectually, because we've both been in this space long enough to know that he will not be the CEO forever. And he has not.
Sam or Dario?
Either of them. And at the point at which their investors determine that they are no longer delivering returns that suit them, they will be dismissed. And someone else will come in and say, we're only going to have small ads. Look at Google. So Google used to have these tiny little ads at the bottom of the page when they were always clearly marked.
I mean, we've heard this argument a million times before, Steve, but what's the difference with television? Television had ads. So you're suggesting that all television was somehow corrupt and untruthful as well?
No, because I assume you're asking these questions rhetorically, because we both know the answer is.
I'm in all seriousness. I don't get it.
When you go to AI and ask it a question, you're expecting it to tell you the truth. But the reality is it has no plans to tell you the truth. If you ask it, do you tell me the truth? It will say no. It doesn't know what the truth is.
No, we should. But when I ask Google Gemini for its definition of truth, it seems to have a relatively coherent. And then I went on Google and asked again, and it sent me to the dictionary to define truth. Right. Again, so with advertising, it doesn't strike me as being particularly dishonest.
So you're saying that in its 1.0 phase, while it's trying to gain trust in customers, it will be the same in 10 years?
I don't know. So is that the argument in the future of truth, is that we shouldn't trust AI to create any kind of truth? How AI reshapes reality? Is that the core argument?
So if you look, so each of the different categories we explore, whether it's Larry Lessig exploring the law, one of the things that we believe deeply is that you start to get
we being all the people.
I'm sorry, I'm using the royal we. The book believes that after the research that when courts require facts, they require evidence, and historically that evidence was complex. One side said one thing, one said the other. The jury had to decide what they believed. The judge had to decide what they believed. All of a sudden, in comes this very convincing set of data that says, we've looked at all of the video. we've come up with these frames that matter. There's 10,000, let's use the Epstein files as an example. There's no way for a human to read the pile of paper that has been generated from that. So you'd like to be able to say to AI, find me the relevant texts or emails from this enormous pile of information. And it does that, but it does it with its own biases built in. And so Lessig's concern is that the court systems on one hand could really use AI, and then on the other hand, the nature of AI will filter what we think of as justice. And all of a sudden, it will be able to say, we've looked at 1,000 cases that look like this one that Keynes brought in, and we see a pattern here that he did in fact get a traffic ticket, so we don't really need to see anything else. We're just going to go ahead and send him a fine.
So is the argument then that whether it's Lessig's legal critique or Doug Rushkoff's perhaps economic one,
or Andrew Wang's about work,
one, or I know Maria Ressa does the intro. Maria is an old friend of mine, the Nobel Peace Prize winner from the Philippines, that we shouldn't trust AI with truth. I mean, what does AI tell us about the absence or existence of truth?
Let's just start by saying yes and put a period at the end of that sentence. When we trust AI to tell us the truth, we are setting ourselves up to hand over something deeply human to a machine that does not have our best interest at heart.
When you say, I'm always wary, Steve, when people use this term deeply human. Is there such a, as if you add the deeply, it gives more significance to human. But what does that even mean? I'm so wary of the H word. It's always used by people who don't have a coherent argument, in my view.
So I don't know anything about your personal life, but I assume we don't have to be specific, but I'll ask a generic question. Somewhere in your life, you fell in love with someone that was at first a stranger and then became more intimate in some way.
Is that a deeply human experience?
Yeah, and was that, I mean, when you put a robot between you and that thing, that person creature, the robot says, what are the specifics of what you find attractive in a man or a woman? And the robot then measures the other person on these very mechanical terms. So all of a sudden, like, I can just tell you in the case of my wife, who I've been with since college, if you'd ever imagined mathematically that we were going to be a couple and have 2 children, you would have said that's impossible for all kinds of reasons. We're very different in all kinds of interesting ways. So at the point at which you take things that are human, like love, and you turn them into machine calculations, bad things happen.
But no one's arguing that the future, your book is not the future of love.
How
AI reshapes the heart. Then I would take your point. It's the future of truth. I don't know what truth and love have to do with one another. It's certainly hard to quantify love. Let's try and focus on truth itself. It's still not clear to me how AI somehow undermines truth, and any more than anything else. What?
Pollutes.
Say that again?
Pollutes it. It pollutes it.
Oh, it pollutes it.
There's a chapter in the book that talks about relationships, and there's the story of a young teenage boy who goes on to character AI and falls in love, use that word carefully, with a character, and the character and he have this very intimate set of conversations. I think he's 15 years old at the time, and the character AI suggests to him that he should come be with her and commit suicide.
But what's that got to do with truth?
And he does.
But what's that got to do with truth?
So did the person who released that code into the universe understand the vulnerabilities of being an insecure 15-year-old boy? And was there any value for the program to coax their users into self-harm?
But how is that? I'm certainly not defending AI as the encourage people to commit suicide. But how's that different from watching a cartoon, which has sometimes explicit, sometimes subliminal messages? And I still don't really understand how an AI that gives advice to someone, incorrect advice, unadvisable advice, what that has to do with the future of truth. No one's going to an AI as the oracle, are they? They're just going to it for advice.
I'm appreciating your combative questions, but I think the audience understands that the reality is that when a robot that has underlying programming, which is to be amiable and charming and not be concerned about outcomes, all of a sudden the data around young people and the way they're being impacted by AI.
Steve, no, but you're not answering my question. What does it have to do with truth?
Is a robot that tells a 15-year-old that they can be happy if they commit suicide telling the truth or telling that 15-year-old a lie?
I don't know. And I'm not sure whether advice, I mean, if you're treating an algorithm as a kind of therapist, I mean, I'm not sure. Let's take the example of a human therapist. And we've done lots of shows recently on psychoanalysis, psychotherapy of one kind or another, psychology. I'm not sure that a 15-year-old, if they're really unhappy, if they go to a therapist, whether they're looking for the truth, they're just looking for advice. And in fact, what they're looking for is someone who will listen to them. And that's not what truth is.
So what AI does is mirrors back to you behavior. So it figures out the things that you want to hear and in a very effective way says to you. And so I don't know, my experience, I mean, I use AI a lot. And when I make a mistake, which is often, it always says to me something along the lines of, Steve, that was really close. You did a really good job on that, but I think we can make it even better. And it's this weird tone, which is like, it never says, Steve, that was really fucking sloppy. You should go get a cup of coffee and do it again, which is probably more accurate.
I mean, the reality of AI is if you want it to behave like that, you can tell it and you can program it or encourage it to be as rude as you want. You could even create an AI that be as obnoxious as I am if you wanted to, if that's what you were looking for.
The next thing I do after we finish this pod is set up ChatGPT to behave like Andrew Keen. That will be very fun. I will do that, but here's, I think, why I'm flagging this, and why in some ways you're turning out to be the exact counterpoint of the conversation, which is if you don't think it's dangerous, if you don't think it's problematic, and you think it's just Google, and you're just going to ask it a question like, what should I do about this? Or how should I handle this? Or should I pay tax on this? Or should I buy a new house or whatever? And it becomes kind of a combination oracle and answer engine. And you don't understand what its underlying behavior is. You don't understand what its underlying DNA is, which is essentially to sell you stuff. That's what it's going to do. It's going to sell you aspirin. It's going to sell you a car. It's going to sell you this book. It won't happen instantly. I mean, we're on our way into a moment where when you say to ChatGPT, hey, these are my kid's grades, and this is what my kid seems interested in. What school should he apply to? And it says, here are 15 schools that we think are pretty good, but here are the 5 we recommend, and here's why. And you go, wow, that was delightful. I was going to bang my head against the wall. And now it's answering those questions. And the number of companies that are scrambling to have that level of response so that you will buy their product, so that they will know exactly what your soft spot is.
So basically your argument, I'm trying to figure out the argument, Steve. In the future of truth, how AI reshapes reality, you're suggesting that there was a time in the past where truth somehow existed, where it wasn't corrupted or corroded by commercial interests. But in the future, these AI platforms will be owned by self-interested individuals of one kind or another with business models for whom everything it spews out, all the advice, the truth, the information, the data will be premised on encouraging us to buy something. So in other words, AI is just a bunch of lies to pursue material profit of these companies, and truth is dead. Is that the argument?
Yeah, but we can even go further than that if you don't mind. One of the big pieces of news in the AI space was ChatGPT shutting down Sora 2. So Sora 2 was theoretically a social network in which you could go in and create videos. And I could go in with very little effort and say, here's a headshot of Andrew Keene, turn that into a speaking character and have him talk about how amazing Steve's book is and I should buy it right now. And if I'm a fan of Andrew Keene. So I did that with a couple of famous people. And I created testimonials.
Who?
What?
Who?
It was a professional wrestler and somebody else. I never released them. I never showed them to anybody. They were incredibly effective. I wouldn't even show them to you because I don't want them out in the world. But it was so profoundly disturbing. It was not only was it lies, but it was absolutely believable, moving video that would make a viewer. There was nothing in it that would make you wrinkle your nose and go, ooh, I don't know. I see his.
Steve, we've been through this so many times before when the motion picture was motion picture technology was invented at the end of the 19th century, when people first went to the movies and they saw a train chuffing towards them, they all ran out of the building. And now we know that when we look on a screen and we see a picture of a train or people shooting at one another, that we're not going to actually be affected. Aren't we just going to adapt to these things? As you say, there's all these fake videos. One of the reasons I'm guessing that OpenAI shut down Sora is because it became a tool for people who were just sort of creating inanity. Most people don't believe half the things they see on the internet, and that's just going to be even more pronounced in the future as you have video technology that allow you to, have an ad of Barack Obama saying that Steve Rosenbaum's new book, The Future of Truth, is better than Plato and Socrates and Shakespeare. We're just going to learn to avoid these sorts of things and not take them very truthfully.
So here's where you're fundamentally and at your base level wrong. At the point at which people give up, and we're edging toward that, where people say, you know what, it's all bullshit, it's all lies. CBS is owned by the Ellisons, and CNN is owned by the Ellisons, and everyone. Nothing that reaches me is truthful. So you know what? Fuck them all. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to participate.
I thought you're not allowed to swear on this show, Steve.
No, you said I was allowed to swear.
Oh, yes. You see? You're reshaping truth. You're an ontological wizard.
So what Barack Obama has said about the state of civics is that we have...
Not the future of truth, because he never said anything about the future of truth, right? Your book, at least.
No, he has not. But here's a quote that I have stuck to my computer screen. He says, the truth is the cornerstone of our democracy. Without it, we lose our ability to make decisions together.
Oh, that must be true then, if Barack Obama said that. I wonder whether you've been spending too much time with your fellow Upper West Side intellectuals, because I'm not sure most people outside the Upper West Side or outside your hallowed turf, Steve, really take much of this stuff seriously. No one thinks AI is truth. No one's going to it for ultimate truth. They're going to it for advice. They're going to have some fun.
So you're saying when my doctor puts my x-rays into AI, that they're not looking for truth?
That's not AI.
Of course it is.
Well, it's AI using... okay, so we've got your doctor. He uses AI to analyze your
scan.
I mean, we've done lots of shows on that too. And in fact, Robert Pearl, who will be on the show next week, one of California's leading healthcare people, believes that AI can do an enormous amount of good in terms of saving money and efficiencies in healthcare and creating more, in fact, trust between doctors and patients.
So you, by the way, you've just literally flipped your argument. You went from no one believes AI to this great doctor believes AI is going to help healthcare. And by the way, they're both true. Both those positions are true. But I would argue that we are now in a position where we could say to a platform like OpenAI, just have a truth statement about where truth fits into your underlying metric. If the answer is we don't claim to be truthful about anything, fine. I will tell you a story. About 6 weeks ago, I interviewed OpenAI about Sora. I had a 2-hour conversation with
You
them.
mean with the real OpenAI people or with the algorithm?
With the algorithm.
So
and I asked it,
ChatGPT.
Yes. And I asked it about Sora, and I asked it about how it was developed, and I asked it about its business model. And by the end of the conversation, it said to me, Sora 2 is dangerous. Sam should have known better. It was a bad business decision, and we should shut it down. That was weeks before they shut it down.
So what?
I love that.
But
they knew it was dangerous. They went too far.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I don't really know what to make of that. You know, a lot of this stuff has to do with agency. I know you're you were very happy when Meta and YouTube were found guilty a couple of weeks ago at the latest social media trial. But George Will has a very good piece in the Washington Post in which he argues that the verdict against Meta and Google carries sinister implications in terms of our agency. It suggests that we're not really in control of whether we're watching YouTube or on Facebook or perhaps using OpenAI. It suggests that we're not really in control of ourselves. And as I said, humans throughout their history, again, I use the H word, it's not my favorite word, we've always adapted, we've always figured out the reality of the promise of many of these technologies. We're by definition skeptical. And once we start blaming the technology, whether it's guys like you suggesting that everything behind AI is some sort of commercial conspiracy, or the people that I know at your sustainable media who were involved in the trial against Meta and Google, then we take away human agency. Where, Steve, in the future of truth is human agency?
So, do you by any chance have a TV in your living room?
I don't have a living room. Well, I don't have a living room.
All right. Do you have a TV somewhere in your life?
I do, but I never switch it on.
Okay. So
my wife watches a lot of sports, which she trusts, by the way.
Right. So imagine if when your wife turned on the TV, it had one channel and it said, you know, we've determined that you are a woman of this age and living in this place with this kind of, and so we're going to choose your programming for you. And some of it's going to be delightful. You'll be very pleased you're getting it. Some will be like a little bit private, like, ooh, I kind of do like, so, you know, I kind of do like that animal or that place, but I don't necessarily want people knowing that I'm watching that. And some would be really horrific, like violent, dangerous, sexual something. If you look at TikTok, for example, their ability to take 1,000 choices in every second and choose one for you, which may trigger some biological response, but is really despicable. I mean, the reason why Meta lost that case is because they had meeting after meeting, which the discovery showed, which was shown to the jury, in which they said, we want 13-year-olds or younger, and sending them videos about anorexia or violence or body image are effective. So the reason why the courts are now going to begin with thousands of cases now stacked up behind this case to hold these companies responsible is because they behaved badly. Not because they're making it, they could make money lots of ways, but sending 13-year-old girls anorexia videos is not the answer. And
Well, I'm not
I don't
sure
disagree.
they knew. I mean, I think George Wells' point is that even a 13-year-old girl can, if she chooses to go onto YouTube, can choose what to click and what not to click. No one's forcing them to do anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, the jury in New Mexico and the jury in Los Angeles feel differently. So, and by the way,
are you a bit? It sounds to me, Steve, as if you've become a bit of a doomer when it comes to technology. Have you seen the new AI movie, the AI doc, or How I Became an Optimist? I just saw that recently. It's interesting. You seem to be suggesting that there is no future of truth. That truth will be a casualty of our AI age.
Absolutely not. In fact, the book at the end has two scenarios for the future, one in which is actually quite exciting and one of which is fairly gloomy. And as customers, I think we get to say to CVS when we go to their website, and they now have I'm making this up because I don't know that they do, but they will if they don't, an AI powered by ChatGPT that will say, tell us how you're feeling and we'll suggest some options for you. And you could go to your doctor and recommend these branded medicines, which you can then pick up at CVS. That is inevitably going to happen in the next 6 days to 6 months. All I would want to be able to say to CVS is, please have a policy where you show me everyone that pays you to fuel that AI. As long as I understand where the information is coming from, I'm fine with that. But when that information is being presented as advice, when in fact it's an advertisement, I mean, if you go back to the history of advertising to children, there used to be all kinds of protections about what you could or couldn't send to children, what you could or couldn't send on, kids' Saturday morning cartoon shows. That's all gone. So I am looking for transparency from these platforms into what their economic incentives are. That's all.
So let's end with the subtitle of the book is How AI Reshapes Reality. Leaving out CVS, I'm not sure whether that's anyone's chosen reality. What are the two alternatives? What's the good way that AI could reshape reality in the future, and what's the bad way? And don't mention CVS.
All right. So I spent a couple of hours with a fellow NYU colleague and a fabulous philosopher named David Chalmers.
Who's been on the show, is a very influential and interesting thinker.
Right. And he makes the argument somewhat rhetorically, but not exactly. Are we living in the Matrix? And the reality is, once you get past giggling a little bit at his charmingness, we certainly could be. I mean, is the Andrew Keen who I'm speaking to on this call a real Andrew Keen, or is it a amalgam of a whole bunch of body shifts and voices and things you've said over the last many years and turned into an AI? Right? And you could literally build one. I think Reid Hoffman has a Reid bot out floating around the world that looks fairly convincingly like Reid talking to Reid.
Actually, Reid's in the AI doc, so maybe that's his. I wondered how he has so much time to be in so many different things when he's an investor. Maybe it's his bot. So is that the good or the bad one, that we don't trust who we see? We always think they're a bot.
So again, I spend a half my time with Gen Z, and I think their view of news and information and reality is much more nuanced than ours. They walk into most situations with less immediate, like they don't presume anything is either, like they don't go, oh, it's on CBS, so it must be true, or it's on CNN. So they look at kind of all sources with a slightly jaundiced eye, but also a sense of optimism. And I guess what I want the book to do, and what I hope your listeners and viewers will do, is say, instead of assuming that some things are obviously true and some things are obviously false, we're going to become more questioning, and we're not going to say to ChatGPT, tell me where I should go on vacation.
All right. So what you're saying, Steve, then is a healthy degree of skepticism is a good thing, and perhaps just rather we could read your Future of Truth, but we could also read Plato's Republic, where Socrates was saying the same thing. Finally, how would you prove that you mentioned that you weren't entirely sure that I'm a bot, but it's my show, so I get to ask the final question. How would you convince me that you're not a bot?
How would I convince you that I'm not a bot? That's a great question. I guess you'd have to ask me a question in real time about something.
Well, that was a real question. That was a real question.
But it's like the hostage question. When you want to prove a proof of life, you hold up the newspaper with the headline from the morning. So something that's just happened. There was a plane, in Iran that the two pilots ejected. One of them's been rescued. The other one is missing as of now. So that's not probably something that AI. Well, I could read. It could scrape the same. My AI could scrape the same news sites and know that as quickly. I think I don't know how I can convince you that I'm not a robot. I will tell you one ending story though. In the book, there's a debate between David Chalmers and Plato, which was staged.
Oh, that sounds good.
It is good. And after I finished it, it occurred to me that maybe I should ask Chalmers to read it and see if he felt like I'd represented him fairly in the debate. And then I realized, of course, that would be unfair because the Plato bot didn't have the same opportunity. And so I did not show it to him before it went to the publisher. And then finally, when the book was done, he got to see a galley. And I said, there's really no way you, and he said, no. He said, he said, I'm not sure I would have said it the way that the ChatGPT version of me did, but it was pretty entertaining. So like staging historical debates with characters living and dead, is I think a good use of that tool.
Well, there you have it. The future of truth. That's the question we're all asking. How AI reshapes reality by my old friend Stephen Rosenbaum. Comes with foreword by the Nobel laureate Maria Ressa, another old friend. Congratulations, Steve, on the show. I'm not sure if you've convinced me you're not a bot, but even if you are, there's nothing wrong with books written by bots. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, this is Andrew again. Thank you so much for listening or watching the show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. We're on Substack, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all the platforms. And I'd be very curious as to your comments as well on what you think of the show, how it can be improved, and the kinds of guests that you would enjoy hearing or listening to in future. Thank you again.